Hi, English students. This is Mr. Beatty. I wanted to touch base with you very briefly today about what we're going to be talking about, and that is primary and secondary sources. So whenever we're doing research, excuse me, the difference between those two. First of all, I wanted to thank VRMLK12 for this slideshow. I actually got this online. So we want to talk about primary and secondary resources. So a primary resource is an original object or document. In other words, it's first-hand information, right? Typically, they are produced within the time period that we're going to be investigating. And these enable researchers to get as close as possible. So anytime that we're doing research, we usually want to use primary resources if we can, right? Examples of these might be diaries and journals, like the famous Diary of Anne Frank, or also Sarah Morgan, who was around in the Civil War, and she wrote in her diary. So we know a lot about what we know regarding the Civil War because of her writings. Autobiographies, like Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom, would be considered a primary source because it's coming directly from him. Speeches, such as Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg or Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream, all of the presidential inauguration speeches. Like Barack Obama's famous Yes, We Can. Primary sources include birth certificates, government records, deeds, military records, tax records, any piece of art, which would also include first-hand accounts or stories. So, in the day of television, interviews are considered primary sources. It might be sound recordings. Or any kind of interview that we have. So these are all considered primary sources, all right? Additionally, we might have photographs, like the famous gentleman in World War II named Frank Cappa took a lot of the photographs, and that was really the first time that photography was used to document war. But those are actually primary sources as well, and we can learn a lot from those. So letters are also considered primary sources. So soldiers would write back and forth in every war. I know Ken Burns is a documentary film producer and director, and he puts together lots and lots of historic films, and that's often what he uses is primary letters that were written from soldiers in Vietnam back to their families. Right? Secondary sources are not originated by the original people in history, but it's when other people write about them. So if someone wrote a biography, so if I decided that I was really interested in John Adams, and I wrote a book about John Adams, who was our second president, that would not be considered a primary resource, but rather a secondary resource. And typically they're written long after those people are dead. Right? Newspapers and magazine articles can be primary or secondary. So if the article was written at the time something happened, then it's a primary. For example, the article written on Barack Obama's inauguration in 2009 are primary sources. However, if a reporter in 2009 wrote about George Washington, then it would become secondary. Right? So yeah, like I said, primary sources are usually the basis, or always the basis for secondary resources. If I tell you something, I am a primary source. If I tell someone else what I told you, you are the secondary source, okay? So primary source is going directly to that person. A secondary source is when someone else tells what someone else tells, okay? Almanacs, encyclopedias, history books, etc. are all considered secondary resources. All right. So I just wanted to give you a quick rundown. We do have an assignment, 4.06, in this unit that deals entirely with secondary resources. So I think that this will be very helpful for you this week. All right. Any questions? Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.